Imagine a road where the dead don't stay buried, a road where every mile whispers secrets and every turn leads to a nightmare you can't escape. This is The Dead Road. And tonight, I'm going to tell you 4 stories that will make you question every dark stretch of highway you've ever driven. But be warned, once you enter the dead road, there's no turning back. It was a cold, moonless night when Sarah decided to take the shortcut home. The dead road was infamous, but she was running late, and the GPS insisted it was the fastest route. The trees loomed like skeletal hands, clawing at the sky, and the air felt heavier with every mile. That's when she saw him, a man in a tattered coat, thumb outstretched, standing under a flickering street lamp. Sarah hesitated. Something about him felt off, but guilt gnawed at her. What if he was stranded? What if he needed help? She pulled over. The moment he slid into the passenger seat, the temperature dropped. His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Thank you," he said. "I've been waiting for a ride for a long time." Sarah tried to make small talk, but his answers were vague, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. When she glanced at the rearview mirror, she froze. The back seat was empty, but the reflection showed the man still standing on the roadside, his face twisted into a grin. Panicked, she slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. The passenger seat was empty. But on the seat, she found a crumpled photographer picture of her, taken years ago, at the exact spot where she'd picked him up. That was just the beginning. Because the dead road doesn't just take hitchhikers sit, it takes memories, it takes lives, and sometimes it takes something far worse. Like in our next story, Mark was a trucker, used to long hauls and lonely roads, but nothing could have prepared him for what he encountered on the dead road. It was 3 a.m. when his headlights caught the sign, "Welcome to Black Hollow Population 47. The town was eerily quiet, the streets lined with crumbling buildings and flickering gas lamps. Mark needed gas, but every station was abandoned. Finally, he spotted a diner, its neon sign buzzing faintly. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and decay. The waitress didn't speak. She just pointed to a booth where an old man sat, staring at a chessboard. "You shouldn't be here," the man said, his voice trembling. "This town? It's not for the living." Before Mark could respond, the lights went out. When they flickered back on, the diner was empty. The streets outside were silent, the buildings now just hollow shells. Desperate, Mark ran back to his truckenly to find the engine wouldn't start. That's when he heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the shadows. And then a voice. "You're one of us now." Mark was never seen again, but drivers who pass through Black Hollow swear they see his truck, parked at the edge of town, its headlights cutting through the fog, as if waiting for the next traveller to join him. Emily had a secret. 5 years ago, she was driving drunk on the dead road when she hit someone. Terrified, she fled the scene, leaving the victim to die. She told herself it was an accident, that she had no choice. But guilt haunted her every night. One evening, she received a letter. No return address, just a single line. "The dead road demands payment." Ignoring it, she tried to move on. But strange things began to happen. Her car wouldn't start unless she whispered an apology. Her radio played static, except for a faint voice repeating, "You owe a debt." Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She returned to the dead road, determined to face whatever awaited her. As she drove, the road seemed to stretch endlessly, the trees closing in like prison bars. And then she saw him, the man she'd hit, standing in the middle of the road, his face pale and lifeless. Emily slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The car skidded, crashing into a tree. When she woke up, she was in the hospital. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. But as she looked out the window, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The man was standing there, staring at her, his lips moving silently. And on the glass, written in frost, were the words, "Payment received." Emily never drove again, but sometimes, late at night, she hears the sound of tires screeching and a voice whispering, "The dead road always collects." The dead road doesn't just claim individuals, it takes families. In 1987, the Millers were driving home after a weekend getaway. Mom, Dad, and their 2 kids, Emily and Jake, were laughing and singing along to the radio. But as they turned onto the dead road, the laughter died. The road was eerily quiet, the trees lining it twisted and gnarled. The radio crackled, then went silent. Dad tried to turn it back on, but all they heard was static, and then a voice. "Get out," it whispered. "Get out now." Mum laughed nervously. "Kids, stop playing with the radio." But Emily and Jake weren't touching it. The voice came again, louder this time. "Get out." Dad sped up, trying to outrun the fear. But then the headlights caught something on the road, a figure standing in the middle of the lane. Dad swerved and the car skidded to a stop. When they looked back, the figure was gone. But something was wrong. Emily was gone too. They searched the car, the road, the woods, but Emily was nowhere to be found. And then the voice came again, this time from the back seat. "You shouldn't have stopped." Mom turned around, and there was Emily, her eyes black, her smile too wide. "Now we'll all stay," she said. The car wouldn't start, the doors wouldn't open, and one by one, the Millers vanished, first Jake, then Mom, then Dad. The car was found days later, empty, the keys still in the ignition. But if you drive the dead road at night, you might see them, the Millers, standing by the side of the road, waving. And if you stop, they'll invite you to join them, forever. The dead road doesn't just exist in stories. It's out there, waiting for the next traveller, the next victim. So the next time you're driving alone at night and you see a sign for the dead road, ask yourself, are you brave enough to take the turn? Or will you be the next story whispered in the dark? Sleep tight if you can.